All right, our top story tonight, as Donald Trump relentlessly continues to crack down on those who protested on American college and university campuses, the deportation action has struck Indians as well. Indian national Badar Khan Suri has been arrested over allegations of spreading anti-Semitism and his ties to Hamas. He's a Georgetown University postdoctoral fellow. Badar was arrested by federal agents outside his Virginia home on Monday night after being informed that his visa was revoked. He's also awaiting an immigration court date. Badar, who is living in the US on a student visa, is married to an American citizen who was born in Gaza. His wife, Mafisi Saleh, and Badar met in Jamia Millia Islamia University in New Delhi. Mafisi's father, essentially Badar's father-in-law, is a political advisor to Hamas. In the last few days, a few other Indian origin students have been accused of supporting Hamas too. Ranjini Srinivasan, a PhD scholar at Columbia University, self-deported after she was listed by the Trump administration as advocating for violence and terrorism. The Trump administration has invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 as well, which is an immigration law last used after World War II. Now, here's where the tussle lies. Trump and his team have made it clear that they will be deporting the illegals. Then they deported students who were part of anti-Israel protests on American campuses. And now they're even deporting green card holders. While the green card has certain conditions attached to it, many say that multiple cases of deportations have been unjustified with no reason given by the authorities. Civil rights groups criticize Donald Trump's actions as politically motivated and lacking substantial evidence. These incidents, remember, also reflect a significant shift in the U.S. immigration policy concerning foreign students engaged in political activism. Let me introduce my guests on the show to talk more on this and delve into what has been happening in the United States of America as far as Indian origin students are concerned. On Global Mirror, I'm joined by David Sofair. He's a Republican strategist. Raymond Vickery, Senior Associate, Center for Strategic and International Studies and former Assistant Secretary of Commerce. I'm also joined by Adit Kothari, founding member, Index Society. He's UK-based. Good evening and namaskar to all of you gentlemen. Raymond Vickery, let me begin with you. There's a line of cases that have come to the fore with Donald Trump's administration saying that because these students were protesting against Israel and they were supporting Hamas is why they are being deported. But simultaneously, there are also other cases where deportations have happened or people have been detained without giving any reason. What do you make of that?
Well, thanks for having me. Namaskar. I appreciate the need to fight terrorism wherever it occurs, but there's also a need for a rule of law and a procedure for invoking this 18th century act. During World War II, in fact, this Alien Enemies Act was used, but only after hearings as to what the evidence was. So the approach of the administration, the Trump administration, seems to be, basically shoot first and ask questions later. While that might work in some circumstances, that's not the way in which a constitutional democracy should work. There ought to be a reasonable due process hearing in order to be able to determine what the facts are. And then proceed from there. And of course, you can say, well, this fellow or that fellow was a bad actor, and so he shouldn't get due process, and we ought to go forward. But the problem is, then you start to sweep up people who maybe don't look like the majority of Americans, maybe legitimately in the country from India or elsewhere, and expressing what are supposed to be constitutional rights under the First Amendment for free speech. And once you start down that road of just saying that you defer to some bureaucrat to decide who gets in and who gets out and who deserves to speak and who doesn't, well, then your freedoms are eroded. So this is a very troubling development. And it's not limited to this one Indian student who has this particular background, but you see it now with Venezuelans, you see it across the board. The problem is that there are some people in the Trump administration who are basically anti-foreigner, and they don't want to have that. They want to go back to a time when the U.S. kept out people of differing backgrounds. Okay. So this is very troubling, and I would hope that
you know, I want to
courts
take
will
this
stand
across to David Sofair, Raymond Vickery. David Sofair, do you want to come in on this? You know, what Raymond Vickery is saying has been echoed by many critics of Donald Trump who say that, yes, there might be cases where deportations are justified, but there are several cases where it's been very conveniently laws are being revoked, they are being invoked, and deportations are happening. Say, for example, the case of Ranjani Srinivasan, she self-deported herself from the Columbia University. She said that she did not support Hamas. She was not part of those protests, and she was just being targeted.
Right. Well, actually, that's she does not support Hamas. She has links to Hezbollah, and she was there at Nasrallah's funeral. So that's why she's self-deported. Let's be clear on that point. Now, in respect to Badar Suri, he was arrested, and he was not. He was arrested under the deportable. He's deportable under the Immigration and Nationality Act. Now, whether he's a student, I mean, he's on a student visa, so okay, and he has close ties to very high-ranking terrorists here. So let's just stay focused on that. So that makes his. So yes, that does make him a candidate for expulsion out of the country. Absolutely. So we are actively fighting domestic and foreign terror threats. So this has nothing to do with freedom of speech, which we have, which freedom of speech here is in America, and we have political protests. Let's be clear, that's not what he's being arrested for. He's being arrested for spreading Hamas propaganda and his association with a violent senior advisor to Hamas. So let's be very clear on that. It's also important to say.
You know, David, I absolutely understand what you're saying. Right. And I also understand that the green card and, you know, being in a foreign country and protesting or supporting a particular designated terror group, again, is, you know, justifies the fact that you can be arrested and you can be deported. But the fact of the matter is also that the Donald Trump administration has gone ahead and defied court orders. Where does that end? That line between having the right to disobey court orders and actually going outrightly, you know, completely defying court orders has become very thin.
At the end of the day, we're taking out the worst first. Okay, we're going after organized crime. So people in Venezuela, they have organized gangs there, and we're deporting them. We're coming after people that have links to terrorist organizations domestically and internationally. And I think it's very important to point out that during September 11th, a lot of the terrorists there were on student visas as well. So it's irrelevant if they're on a student visa or a green card holder. If we can find out who these people are and really investigate that and make America a safer place, I think that should be a good thing. And all Americans, it should be a bipartisan thing. Why fight for gang members, organized crime, and organized terror groups? Now, there's a big difference between terrorists, known people that have links to terrorism and freedom of speech. So let's not get those two confused. And the majority of people that are here on student visas are here to study and here to contribute for the greater good. So let's be clear on that. So, I'm not going to sit here and apologize for Badar Suri's involvement in terrorism.
Okay. Okay, Adit, I want to understand from you this entire debate about having protests on college campuses. America saw it, and there were several people who said that, while there is student protest, there is activism. These are also politically motivated. These are funded from external forces, and these are not students. What's the kind of atmosphere that prevails on university campuses outside of India? Are they students? Are they activists? Are they politicians? Young politicians who have ambitions of becoming big in political parties? What's really the atmosphere?
Thanks for having me, Shreya. Look, I think fundamentally we've got to see it from a prism that these students who were granted these visas, they were granted them as guests, and it was granted as a privilege to them. And they essentially failed to make certain assertions,
Sure.
which essentially were in direct violations of their agreements of their visas. Thus, deportation is absolutely fair. In this case, I'm basically going towards the Brandenburg principle of freedom of speech, which is basically the golden standard of freedom of speech, which the United States follows. If you are supporting a designated or a proscribed terror outfit who themselves claim to have carried out barbaric atrocities against women and children, you are in violation of that particular freedom of speech standard. Thereby, United States law enforcement agencies are well within their rights to exercise their preventive measures. And that is what has happened in this case. I mean, Badar Khan Suri, he not only has direct links to the Hamas, the high table within Hamas, his own wife's family is linked to Nasrallah directly. But also, he has been seen hobnobbing with various Hamas leaders. His social media is completely full of propaganda material, which is basically patronizing and platforming Hamas agenda. And if he's violating such norms, which he should have read his visa norm before, he applied for the United States visa, I don't think there is anything to whine about. David made a fundamental point. Whether or not this is being done or targeted in a more sort of a blanket way, or is it being targeted at individuals who are predominantly in violation of those visa norms? In my understanding, all of the cases that we've seen so far, including Ranjini Srinivasan, because she was, there's a Al Jazeera video of her going across the social media norms where she is being seen to obstruct people from getting inside the campus at Columbia. So, there is one thing about freedom of speech. The other thing is, that freedom of speech basically ends when you start obstructing people. So the case in point is that you are basically violating the golden standard of freedom of speech, and thereby your visa or your rights to be a guest in the United States can be taken away by the administration which is there in power. And you've also got to give it to the Trump administration because these are the fundamental promises that they actually made to the electorate before they came into power. So they're basically playing to the gallery, and they're basically doing exactly what they promised to their electorate. Shreya.
Okay. Raymond, do you want to comment on this? Raymond, Vickery, the fact of the matter is that all of these points that both David as well as Adit are making as far as rules in a country are concerned, when you get a citizenship of a country, when you own that green card, when you have your visa approved, there are certain conditions. There are no free lunches, and therefore you have to follow the rules and regulations. The Biden administration knew that Hamas is a designated terror group, yet they allowed the kind of protests that happened across university campuses, college campuses, supporting what happened to Israel.
Well, there's a difference between protesting on a campus and actually committing something that would get you deported after you've been accepted and have a clean record. The idea, yes, the Biden administration allowed constitutionally protected protests. If the case is so open and shut as being said against one or more individuals, why not go through the due process proceeding? as opposed to just knocking on the door, putting them in handcuffs and hauling them away. You know, there's the old saying, when they came for the Jews, I wasn't a Jew, and so I didn't worry about that. And then they came for those who were opposed, and I wasn't for that. But then they came for me, and there was nobody left to say anything on my behalf. So what we have had in the United States, in India, in other great democracies, is due process and rule of law. The essence of civilization is to be able to resolve these things without violence. This is not the way in which to proceed. It's not in the way in which the laws of the United States have been set up, and I predict, and it's already happening, that the judicial branch is saying, listen, that's not the way in which a great democracy is supposed to operate. Now, that having been said, sure, we want to do everything we can within the law and within constitutional rights to be able to fight terrorism, and U.S. and India have cooperated on that. But that doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater and just say, well, the knock on the door, that was a guy I didn't like and seemed to be a bad guy, and some bureaucrat decided he was a bad guy, and so we'll throw him in chains and get him out of here. That's not the way to proceed in a great democracy.
Okay, let me get David Sofair to respond to you, Raymond Vickery. David Sofair, you want to respond to what Raymond Vickery is saying? One, that it's really out of convenience that certain cases are being deported or they're being arrested. Two, what happened on college and university campuses were just words, were protests. They were not translating into real action.
Look, so we have to stay focused here, right? There's not been a mass student deportation, and this is a false narrative saying that protesters are being targeted. We're not targeting any protesters. We are targeting organized criminals and terrorists in regards to Badar Suri. We're not coming after a specific group. So what you're saying is a misleading narrative, and we are focused today on Badar Suri, who is it doesn't matter where he's from, he's got links to Hamas, which is a terrorist group, and senior ones, and so that is a threat to democracy in Washington, D.C. I take this very personally because I live here. So now you have a terrorist who's just down the street. Okay, so now he is getting due process. He's being questioned, he's being detained, he has rights to a lawyer and all that kind of stuff. So he does have his due process. We're not going after it. We're Tren de Agua. Okay, that's another organized group, which is a organized gang. We're deporting them as well. These should be things that Democrats and Republicans should come together on, because we are making America safe again. So I take this very personally, and you can't obstruct people during protests. That's called violent protests. So we're not taking away anybody's rights. We're not taking away human rights. We are restoring democracy, and we're making America a safer place.
So, David, if tomorrow a certain group of students stand up in college campuses and protest against, say, one of Donald Trump's policies, it's not, violating any constitutional law. Would Donald Trump's administration and would Trump himself allow that?
Of course he would, and he's allowing it every single day. We have freedom of speech. Now with Badar Suri, this is not a freedom of speech person. He is with senior Hamas advisors. So we don't know. We're finding out now, we're gathering intel. We don't know. He could be planning an attack. He could be, we're not sure. So we're figuring that out now. At the moment, he's just detained, and he can be rendered deportable, because the last time I checked, terrorism is a crime. So this has nothing to do with students protesting or freedom of speech. Let's be very clear on this. And so we can't conflate the two. This is about American safety and global safety as well. India and the United States are the two biggest democracies in the world, and we've had a strategic partner rooting out terrorism for a long time now. So let's be clear on that.
Okay. Adit, before I wrap up, quickly a question to you. You know, then as far as freedom of expression is concerned, yes, it has its gray areas. Yes, it has been misused as well. But on college campuses where you have young crowds who are passionate about subjects, how do you then regulate?
So Shreya, I think we need to de-hyphenate between the two. The de-hyphenation is basically between pro-Palestinian protest, which is basically you're protesting for securing and saving the lives of the millions of Palestinians, and the other bit is obviously protesting to ensure that you can patronize and platform Hamas federal agenda, and that's what we see happening from our prison. The argument can be made that they came for the Jews first, and I wasn't a Jew, and then so on. But the counter argument to that is also that one of these characters could well be planning a terror attack. Then what? So you've seen world over since 9/11 that you had suspects on your terror list, but you failed to take preventive measures because of the political correctness, because you wanted to hide behind the garb of multiculturalism, and that hurt the collective society at large. So I don't see anything wrong in this particular scenario because you have the evidence available at your disposal. His social media speaks about, the kind of school of thought that he actually comes from. And there is absolutely nothing wrong in taking those preventive measures. Let the due process be for him. Let the ball be in his court to prove that, he is not what the government basically is prescribing him to be, rather than being the opposite side of things.
Yeah, okay.
So that's where I would like to leave it, Shreya.
Yeah, I think the key point here is due process should be followed, whether it's those who are supporting Hamas and terror groups like Hamas, or whether there are cases where they're saying that they're being targeted. And, there are several cases that have come to the fore where no reason has been given by the authorities. Those need to be checked as well. But I'll leave it here. Thank you very much to all of you gentlemen, David, Sofair, Raymond, Vickery and Adit, for joining us on Global Mirror and sharing your perspective. With that, ladies and gentlemen, it's a wrap on Global Mirror. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Up next is Neha Koshi with Beyond the Headlines.